Hello YouTube, this is Sasatsu 5 and I thought I would make a video. That was a little on my phone, sorry about that. I thought I'd make a video talking about plain edge versus serrations. Here lately I've gotten a few comments asking about my preference for self-defense, serrations versus plain edge from different people. And I have two videos comparing the two, and and plus my everyday knife use experience. And I'm going to go ahead and say this. I think I need more testing to make a informed decision on which one is better for self-defense. But I thought I'd go over some of the pros and cons of both and why I carry what I carry. And in the two videos I have testing this, I have one when I was pretty young. I got a water bottle and I stuffed it inside of a elephant skin boot that dry rotted. The elephant skin was still pretty good, but where the soles connected to the upper was dry rotted, and the cobbler told me that they were not really recoverable, that if I were to re-sole them, they would just come apart. So I decided to sacrifice those, and I put a water bottle inside the elephant skin boot, and I chopped at it with I think an Endura and a serrated Endura or a serrated Pacific salt, I can't remember. And you know what? They both cut, and they both opened up the elephant skin leather. And I have another video where I'm a little bit older, have a little bit more experience. I'm not entirely happy with the video itself due to my aim when cutting, because I cut in a fairly small area, or I had a pork loin wrapped in denim to simulate clothing. Not inseminate, simulate clothing. And the top of the pork loin is a little bit smaller than the middle of the pork loin. And I cut the top of the pork loin with one of the edges, and I cut in the middle with the bottom one. And they both cut deep. But I think, and in that video, I pretty much came to the conclusion that there wasn't a big difference between plain edge versus serrations as far as which one cuts deeper. What I would like to do, and I don't know how I'd do this with my income, but I'd like to get a leather jacket sleeve. Something that's a little bit loose, but is fairly protective, like leather. I guess it could be faux leather. But something that would be around the pork loin, but still have a little bit of slide and give, like a leather jacket. And slash at them with a plain edge versus serration. And I'd like to do this before I say one is better than the other. And while we're on the subject, in the second video where I tested plain edge versus serrations, I did a serrated towel and a plain edge towel. And I want to admit something about that serrated towel. I don't think I've mentioned this in the video in the past, but and it was because I was concerned about my what's the word I'm looking for? Credibility. I was concerned about my credibility, and I didn't want people to think that I was bought. But Lynn Thompson gave me that towel along with, he sent a little care package, and I was conflicted. I wanted to be thankful, and I think I did send a thank you message, but it was a towel and a spada, Cold Steel hats. He sent two of all the apparel stuff, and then two knives, one for me, one for my brother, and gave us two polos, two beanies, two hats, and I think two Sharkies. And I was very thankful for it, but I didn't really say a lot on camera that he gave me this stuff, because I was concerned about my credibility. And I was already being accused of working for Cold Steel because I wore the Cold Steel polos in the testing videos. I just wanted to show that I appreciated the shirt, but people were accusing me of being an employee of Cold Steel, and I will tell you that I am not. If I was an employee of Cold Steel, I wouldn't own knives, or I wouldn't advertise knives from other companies. That would be wrong. And although I love Cold Steel, I am not a Cold Steel fanboy. I will tell you that my brother admits to being a Cold Steel fanboy, but he also admits to saying that the Hisho is his favorite fighting knife. He says this is probably the best fighting knife ever made, in his opinion. But he's a Cold Steel fanboy. I'm not a Cold Steel fanboy. I like variety. What I really like about Cold Steel is that they make big folders, and I think there's a lot of advantages to these big folders over buoys and big tantos and such. But I wanted to go ahead and admit that that tower was a gift, and I appreciate it, and I don't carry it very often. I do carry a tower on a somewhat regular basis. The blue tower, I really like the color blue, as I've shown in other videos. But the blue tower is plain edge. And I don't just carry that tower because it's blue, but I also prefer plain edges for certain tasks. And the reason is I feel that plain edge is more durable. I feel like if I'm going to be hacking on something hard or like bone, or if I'm going to accidentally hit something, like if I'm doing a cut test, or if I'm swinging the knife and I hit something that's slightly metallic, I feel that the plain edge is more reinforced and is more repairable than serrated. If you damage a serration, you might be able to bend it back into shape, but you might have to grind that serration off, or grind serrations off in general, to get a working knife that functions correctly. I feel if you have a serrated blade and you chop something with bone, or if you hit on something hard on accident, whether you're abusing it or if it's accident, I feel that serrations have a tendency to bend out of whack, because you have a very thick point at the point of the serration, but the scallops in the serrations are really thin. I've seen bent serrations before. So that is the reason why I carry plain edge, is because I feel that they are more durable, and if something were to happen, if the edge rolled or the edge chipped, it's more repairable, and it doesn't look like a repair. I will say this about serrations. For rescue knives that are going to be cutting a lot of rope, cordage, I feel that they exceed in this task, and my rescue knife is serrated. I feel they grab material and pull it through the serrations, and it puts more pressure behind the cut when it comes to cutting that fibrous material. You know, I can cut a seatbelt with a plain edge knife pretty easily, but I feel that the serrations, there will be less slide, and it will bite into the fibrous material a lot better than the plain edge. But just meat, you know, this right here, I don't think there's a big difference between serrations and plain edge. And so that's why I don't really carry serrations, because I don't think they give me a big advantage in a self-defense situation. I will say this, Lynn Thompson has told me this in person, and I think he said it in videos. He prefers serrations. The Lynn Thompson signature Vaquero is serrated, and I think when he carries a holdout, he carries a serrated holdout. And he believes, and he's cut a lot more stuff than I have, he believes that serrations cut better. I don't believe this. I know he's more experienced at cutting than me, and I've never cut tatami, so I don't know how serrations act on tatami versus plain edge. But I believe that serrations will cut better if they're slightly dull than a plain edge that is slightly dull. But I don't think a perfect serrated and a perfect plain edge, I don't think there's a big difference between the two, especially on meat. But that's the thing with serrations. If they are just a little bit dull, if you haven't been touching them up, if you've used them to cut, you know, fibrous material or anything, those points are still going to rip. And plain edges don't necessarily have the ability to rip stuff open. We all know, watching MMA, that if you do an elbow to someone's forehead, you can cut them open. You know that little point on your elbow has the ability to cut. We know that saws, not all saws are like this, but saws are not razor sharp, but yet they have the ability to rip stuff open. They have the ability to cut wood. Plain edges can't really cut wood in a sawing motion. So I believe that serrations, when slightly dull, and possibly when they are dead dull, me and my brother often use the term, or at least I use the term, is bringing a knife back to life. When I get a knife that is completely dull, that won't cut paper, and I sharpen it back up to razor sharpness, I say I bring it to life. It was dead, but now it's alive. So I believe that a dull serration will have more cutting capacity than a dull plain edge. But just a perfect plain edge that's kept maintained in a perfect serration, I don't think there's a big difference between the two. I would love to do more testing, but there's some reasons that I haven't been able to do battle blades here lately. Battle blades is basically when I go to the bamboo fields and I put one blade up against another, usually a buoy. I call it Battle of the Buoys, or Battle of Buoy versus Kukri, or whatever. And I put them together, and we'll see which one cuts bamboo, which one cuts meat better, which one cuts meat with clothing, water bottles, rope, And usually, there's not a big difference between the two that's extremely noticeable when it's like two decent buoys or two decent kukris. Now, the cold steel kukri machete, after it's been sharpened, because they don't come necessarily that sharp out of the box, outperformed the Himalayan imports kukri. And people have were really offended by that result, because they feel that kukris that are not made in Nepal are inferior. They feel that they're not real kukris. But I will always say that a thin edge will go through material a lot more efficiently than a thick edge. And I have not owned a Toro or Tora kukri, and I feel that those are better kukris than the Himalayan imports. But Himalayan imports is what I had. The kukri-like object, the kukri machete, actually cuts a lot easier than with the Himalayan imports kukri. I will say this: if someone's wearing a Kevlar helmet, I think the Himalayan imports kukri would have more capabilities of breaking someone's neck or splitting skulls versus the kukri machete. But I will say this: the kukri machete, having a better grind, will cut better than the Himalayan imports kukri. So I guess I tackled two arguments there: thick edge versus thin edge, serrations versus plain edge. That's why, although I like some of his designs, I don't necessarily trust Medford Knife and Tool. I don't necessarily trust what is it, Templar Forge, or whatever it's called, Night Forge. I can't remember, but the really thick knives that are advertised as tactical knives, I think they're a joke. I could be wrong. I can't afford them to test them, but the sharpest blade you'll ever come into contact is either going to be a straight razor or an obsidian blade, and that's because they have very, very thin edges and they cut on the slightest touch. So getting an edge like this, that's like a quarter inch at the on the spine, and it's about that thick on the edge bevel, they're just not going to cut that well. The actual edge, the apex of the edge, might be very thin, but you're pushing a lot more material through that cutting medium. So there, I didn't intend on it to be like that, but I argued the case for both thin edge versus fat edge, and plain edge versus serrated, and I didn't intend on it to get in that argument. But anyways, just to reiterate, I trust plain edge in a self-defense situation, and also something that I might need to try if I can get my hands on some fur, like hog fur would be ideal, or that's, you know, tanned with the fur on, or deer fur, some kind of animal fur. I would like to see plain edge versus serration on that, because, you know, any of you who have ever skint hogs, you know that hogs will dull your blade pretty quickly. And that's not just because, you know, they have very thick hide, they have a lot of fat, and the fur is very coarse. And I'm curious if the plain edge would slide on the fur, or if the serrations will catch on the fur, you know, which one would work better in that situation. That would be something else I'd want to test on the next serration versus plain edge. I'd like to test jacket sleeves, preferably leather, and fur. So, someone asked me about a good self-defense knife for dogs. He's having problems with pit bulls being very aggressive. And although I would always recommend carrying a knife for self-defense as a minimum, you know, if you can't carry a gun, carry a knife for a lethal option. And at least in my state, although people don't abide by it, it's illegal to carry a club for self-defense. Even if it's self-defense against dogs, you can't legally carry a club if it's intended to be a club. If it's a walking stick and it's intended to be a walking stick, you can use it in self-defense. But if you're carrying a short stick for walking for self-defense, that is illegal in Texas, believe it or not. So carry a knife if you can't carry a gun. But to this person who's asking me this question, I told him this: don't discount pepper spray. Pepper spray is very effective. I know from personal experience, not only from being sprayed myself, but we've had some dogs acting aggressive, running up to us barking, and we just sprayed a line in front of the dog, and the dog kind of stopped. And the dog didn't want to cross that line. I'm not saying... And different dogs act differently to different things. With a tactical flashlight, me and my brother noticed at night when dogs run up at us, if we strobe them, big dogs like, well, you know, medium to big dogs will stop and continue barking at us. We noticed that Chihuahuas and lap dogs will actually bark and they'll walk a little bit closer to you, but they won't run. They'll just kind of step up, and they actually seem a little bit more tolerant of bright flashing lights. So I'm covering a lot of material in this video. Forgive me, but pepper spray is good enough for mail carriers. I trust it. So, and always carry a lethal option if you can, but for less lethal, pepper spray is a good option. A flashlight's a good option. And I always say this when referring to police officers who use force against pets. I'm a firm believer that police officers should use pepper spray on pets, especially if they're not a SWAT team, if it's not a SWAT operation, because the owner of the dog will be pissed off at you if you pepper spray it, but the owner of the dog will hate you for life if you kill their pet, if you kill their child, their fur baby. So just for the sake of keeping everybody happy and creating less tension from civilians and police officers, don't shoot people's dogs. Use pepper spray. If you have the opportunity to use pepper spray, don't go for the gun right off the bat, because most dogs, they bark and they act aggressive and they're running at you, but they're not actually having evil intent. They're protecting their property. They're excited to see you. Some dogs just bark and run because they're excited to see you. You know, they're not actually mad at you or angry at you. But so pepper spray is a good thing. Tactical flashlights are a good thing. Knives are a good thing. Yes, I haven't really thought of this before in the past. Self-defense against a four-legged animal, serrations might actually work better, and I don't know that for a fact, but that would be interesting if I can get my hands on a piece of hog fur and test that. So that's it. I'm a Satsu5. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, thank you, Lynn Thompson, for the care package. If I didn't acknowledge this publicly on video, it's because I was concerned with my credibility, but I truly appreciate the gift. And I've also received a gift from from Tobacco Barn, believe it or not. But I didn't use that product on camera, I don't think. I don't receive a lot of gifts, but I'm appreciative of it. I'm just concerned with my credibility. I don't want people to think that I'm giving something a good review because I got it for free. And I watch a lot of fashion channels, not a lot of them, but I watch Alpha M, Real Man, Real Style, and I enjoy them, but I notice that their videos are commercials. They have some good information in them, but in the middle of the video, they'll say this video is sponsored by whatever, and I recommend it. And it really irritates me because are you recommending this company because you truly like them or because they're a sponsor? And I've learned some good information about fashion from Alpha M and Real Man, Real Styles. They have good information. I just don't like seeing commercials just because they're a sponsor. And I know that YouTube is a tough thing to to do without a sponsor. My channel has suffered greatly due to policies and my lack of revenue. I can't do the stuff that I would like to do. Zombie Go Booms have issues. A lot of Second Amendment channels have issues. Your Org has to have a sponsor now because YouTube is, not agreeing with them. But I don't like the fashion channels being commercials. I want to learn about fashion, not about who's giving you free stuff. So that's it. I hope you found this video maybe not entertaining but useful. And if I do more testing on plain edge versus serration, if I'm able to get the data that I need to make a direct, yes, this one's better than that one, I will definitely make that video. But as of right now, I like plain edge. I still use serrations, but I like plain edge for the majority of the things that I do. So that's it. I'm a Satsu 5, and I'm out.